Millionaire arrived at Valentine party, unaware he has a daughter until his ex walked in. She stood there like a ghost made flesh, holding the hand of a child who had his eyes. His exact eyes, gray-blue and sharp, staring up at him with an intelligence that made his blood run cold. The champagne glass slipped from Julian Mercer's fingers. It shattered against the marble floor, the sound cutting through 500 conversations like a gunshot. But he heard none of it. He saw none of the turning heads, the startled gasps, the servers rushing to clean the mess at his feet. He saw Vivienne and the child. How old is she? His voice came out broken, barely a whisper. 6. Vivienne's response was ice. Her birthday is March 14th. Julian did the math. His mind raced backward through calendar pages, through seasons, through the worst decision of his life. March. 9 months before that would be June. June, 6 years ago. The month everything between them had ended. The month he had chosen wrong. She is mine. It was not a question. Biologically, yes. Vivienne's chin lifted, that defiant gesture he remembered from arguments in another lifetime. In every other way that matters, that remains to be seen. The little girl tugged at her mother's hand. She wore a ruby-red dress with tulle skirts and tiny crystal-studded shoes. Her dark hair fell in waves like her mother's, but those eyes belonged to him. Mama. Her voice was curious, unafraid. Why is that man looking at me like that? Did I do something wrong? And something inside Julian Mercer, billionaire, genius, architect of empires, cracked wide open. Have you ever had a moment where your entire understanding of your life shattered in a single second? Where everything you thought you knew about yourself, your choices, your regrets, it all collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. That is what happened to Julian Mercer on Valentine's night. And what happened next would test everything he believed about redemption, forgiveness, and whether some mistakes can ever truly be undone. This is a story about a man who had everything the world calls success and nothing that actually matters. About a woman who built an empire from heartbreak and the ashes of betrayal. And about a little girl who would teach them both what love really costs. But here is what you need to understand before we go any further. This is not a fairy tale. There is no magic moment where everything becomes okay. What you are about to witness is the messy, painful, beautiful work of becoming someone worthy of the people you have hurt. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you will never think about second chances the same way again. Let me take you back to the beginning of that Valentine's night, before the champagne shattered, before the world tilted on its axis, before Julian Mercer discovered that the greatest achievement of his life had been happening without him for 6 years. The Grand Bellamy Hotel sparkled like a snow globe brought to life. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across 500 guests dressed in shades of crimson and gold. Heart-shaped ice sculptures slowly melted on tables laden with caviar and chocolate. A string quartet played something romantic in the corner, while Manhattan's elite circulated through the ballroom, trading air kisses and business cards with equal enthusiasm. Julian stood near the largest ice sculpture, a ridiculous 12-foot angel with spread wings, nursing a glass of champagne he had not actually sipped. He wore a custom Brioni tuxedo that cost more than most people's cars. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His posture spoke of confidence and control. Inside, he felt hollow. 34 years old, net worth approaching $400 million. Founder and CEO of Axiom Dynamics, one of the fastest-growing artificial intelligence companies in North America. He had been featured on the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and Tech Visionary within the same calendar year. Industry publications called him a genius. Business schools taught case studies about his strategies. Young entrepreneurs lined up at conferences just to shake his hand. And yet, standing in that glittering ballroom surrounded by admirers and opportunists, Julian Mercer felt profoundly, devastatingly alone. Valentine's Day had become his least favorite holiday, approximately 6 years ago. This was a fact he had never admitted to anyone, including himself. He had simply started scheduling important business trips during the second week of February, ensuring he would be somewhere demanding. Singapore, Dubai, Tokyo. Anywhere work could consume the hours between February 13th and 15th. Anywhere he did not have to think about red roses and broken promises. This year, his business partner Marcus had insisted. The Hartwell Foundation Gala was essential networking. Major donors would be present. Potential investors. The kind of room where handshakes turned into 9-figure partnerships. Julian had reluctantly agreed, telling himself he was past whatever ghosts February held. He was wrong. His assistant appeared at his elbow. Dominic Reyes was a serious young man, with sharp instincts and an unshakable calm that made him invaluable during crisis situations. But right now, his face was pale beneath the ballroom lighting. "Mr. Mercer, there is someone you need to see." Julian frowned. He had spent the last hour dodging conversations with people he did not want to talk to. The last thing he needed was another introduction to someone's nephew who wanted startup funding. "Dominic, whatever it is, it can wait until—" "She is here." Dominic interrupted, which he never did. "I think you should prepare yourself." "She." The word landed strange in Julian's chest. There was only one woman Dominic would describe that way. Only one person from Julian's past who warranted a warning rather than an announcement. Before he could ask, before he could brace himself, before he could do anything at all, the crowd near the entrance shifted. Bodies moved aside like a tide parting. And there she was, Vivienne Holloway. 6 years had passed since he had last seen her face. 6 years since he had last held her, hurt her, let her walk away without fighting for what they had. She had changed in ways that made his chest ache with recognition. Her dark hair fell in waves over bare shoulders. Her gown was champagne silk, elegantly understated, clearly designer. She moved through the crowd with the kind of confidence that suggested she no longer needed anyone's approval to know her worth. She was more beautiful than he remembered, more formidable, more herself. And she was not alone. The child held her hand. A little girl in a ruby red dress, maybe 5 or 6 years old, looking around the glittering ballroom with wide eyes and an expression of serious evaluation. She seemed to be cataloging everything she saw, filing it away for later analysis. Then she looked up at Julian, and the champagne glass slipped from his fingers. Time did strange things in moments of absolute shock. It stretched and compressed simultaneously. Julian watched the glass fall in what seemed like slow motion, saw it tumble end over end, caught the light fracturing through the crystal before it hit the marble floor and exploded into 1,000 glittering pieces. Servers rushed forward. Someone called his name. Someone else touched his arm. He registered none of it. The world had reduced itself to a tunnel. Vivienne at one end, Julian at the other, and between them, the small human who represented 6 years of questions he had not known to ask. He was moving before conscious thought caught up, weaving through guests who blurred into irrelevance. His expensive shoes crunched over broken glass, and he did not notice. He did not notice anything except the woman who had once been his future and the child who might be his past made present. When he reached them, Vivienne did not flinch, did not look away. Her chin lifted slightly in that defiant gesture he had loved and feared in equal measure during their time together. It was a look that said she had anticipated this moment, that she had prepared for it, that she was not afraid of him. Julian. Her voice was cool, composed, as if they were acquaintances reuniting at a conference rather than former lovers confronting the existence of a secret child. Vivienne. His voice came out wrong, rough, scraped raw by the magnitude of what he was seeing. His eyes moved from her face to the child and back again, doing calculations that were 6 years too late. "You look well," Vivienne continued in that same measured tone. "I heard the company is thriving. How old is she?" Julian could not manage small talk, could not pretend this was a normal conversation. How old? The question hung in the air between them. Around them, the gala continued. Music played. People laughed. The world moved forward while Julian's entire existence ground to a halt. 6. Vivienne answered finally. Her birthday is March 14th. The math. The horrible, undeniable math. 9 months before March. June. The last time they had been together before everything fell apart. Before he had made the worst choice of his life. She is mine. Biologically, yes. Vivienne's eyes did not waver. In every other way that matters, that remains to be seen. The child, the little girl, was watching this exchange with an expression far too knowing for her age. She held her mother's hand tightly, but she did not seem afraid. Only curious, evaluating the adults with the same analytical attention she had given the ballroom. "Mama." Her voice cut through the tension like a knife through silk. "Why is that man staring at me? Did I do something wrong?" Something cracked inside Julian's chest. He crouched down to her level, moving slowly, the way one approaches something precious and easily startled. He was aware of Vivienne tensing above him, ready to intervene if necessary. "You have not done anything wrong," he said softly. "I am just surprised to see you. That is all." The girl studied him with those gray-blue eyes. His eyes, the family eyes that had passed down through 3 generations of Mercers. She had her mother's dark hair and heart-shaped face, but those eyes were pure Julian. "You are looking at me funny," she observed. "Like you know me, but we have never met. You are very observant. Mama says observant people notice important things that other people miss." She paused, considering him further. "You look kind of sad." "Are you sad?" Julian felt his throat tighten. 6 years old and already reading people with devastating accuracy. Already finding the cracks in carefully constructed walls. "Maybe a little," he admitted. "Why?" "Because I just realized I missed something very important." The girl nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. "I miss important things sometimes too. Like when I forgot to water my plant and it died. Mama says sometimes we can fix things we miss, but sometimes we cannot." "Your mother is very wise." "I know." The girl straightened with obvious pride. "She makes my dresses too. She made this one specially for tonight." Julian looked at the ruby-red dress with its careful stitching and perfect fit. He looked up at Vivienne, who was watching this exchange with an expression he could not quite read. "You made this." "I own a fashion house now," Vivienne replied evenly. "Holloway Luxe. Perhaps you have heard of it." Julian felt another jolt of shock. He had heard of Holloway Luxe. Everyone had heard of Holloway Luxe. The brand had exploded 3 years ago, beloved by celebrities and socialites for its sustainable luxury approach and innovative designs. He had simply never connected the name to his Vivienne, to the woman he had let slip through his fingers. "This is not the place for this conversation," Vivienne said, glancing around at the curious onlookers who were definitely paying attention to the scene unfolding near the ice sculpture. "If you actually want to talk, we can go somewhere private. But Julian, I want to be clear about something. I am not here because I want anything from you. I am here because the foundation I support is being honored tonight. I did not expect to see you. I was not planning to tell you anything. But now I know." Julian stood, his joints feeling stiff, his whole body feeling wrong. "Now I know she exists. You cannot just walk away and pretend this did not happen. I spent 6 years walking away." Vivienne's voice held an edge now, sharp enough to cut. "One more night would not have made a difference. But fine. There is a private lounge on the 2nd floor. We can talk there, but you need to understand something before we continue. This is not a negotiation. This is not a business deal, and my daughter is not leverage in whatever emotional reckoning you are about to have. I would never." "You would never what?" Her eyes flashed. "You would never prioritize something else over someone who needed you. You would never make promises you did not keep. You would never choose convenience over commitment. Because, Julian, that is exactly what you did 6 years ago. That is why she exists without knowing her father. That is why we are having this conversation in whispers at a charity gala instead of having breakfast in a home we built together." The words hit like controlled explosions, each one finding its target with devastating precision. Julian absorbed them without defense because he had no defense. Everything she said was true. "I know," he said quietly. "I know I destroyed everything. I know sorry does not begin to cover what I did. But Vivienne, please, give me 20 minutes. Let me understand what I am looking at. Then you can walk away if you want to and I will not follow." Something flickered in her expression. Pain, maybe, or the memory of pain. She looked down at the little girl who was watching them both with that unnervingly perceptive gaze. "Mira." Her voice softened when she addressed her daughter. "We are going to go upstairs and have a conversation with this man. He is someone Mama knew a long time ago." "Is he the one from the pictures?" Mira asked. "The one you said loved work more than being still." Julian felt those words like a punch to the sternum. Vivienne closed her eyes briefly. "Yes, baby. This is Julian. The Julian who helped make me." Julian's heart stopped. Actually stopped. He could feel it pause between beats, waiting for the world to confirm what he had already known from the moment he saw those eyes. "Yes," Vivienne said simply. "He is." Mira turned to look at Julian with renewed interest. She examined him from head to toe, evaluating, calculating, reaching some conclusion known only to herself. "Okay," she finally said. "Let us go talk then. But I wanted to keep my shoes on. They are new and they have crystals. Despite everything, despite the chaos churning in his chest, Julian almost laughed. She was so much like her mother, practical even in extraordinary circumstances. They made their way through the gala, Vivienne leading with Mira's hand firmly in hers, Julian following behind. He felt the weight of curious stares, the whispered speculation that would undoubtedly become gossip by morning. Julian Mercer, escorting a mystery woman and child out of the Valentine's gala. The society pages would have a field day. He did not care. For the first time in his career-obsessed life, he genuinely did not care what anyone else thought. The only opinions that mattered belonged to the woman in front of him and the child whose existence had just rewritten everything he thought he knew about his own story. The private lounge was on the second floor, accessible through an ornate hallway lined with portraits of the hotel's founders. It was decorated in muted golds, with velvet sofas arranged around a marble fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. This late in the evening, the room was empty. Their footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors. Mira immediately gravitated toward the window, pressing her small hands against the glass. "The buildings look like stars from here," she announced. "Fallen stars that forgot how to float." Julian stared at her. 6 years old and already speaking in poetry. "She is like that," Vivienne said, reading his expression. "Always seeing the world differently than everyone else. She is extraordinary." "Yes." Vivienne moved to a sofa and sat, her posture straight, her expression guarded. "She is. Which is one of the reasons I kept her away from you for 6 years. Because I needed to make sure she would stay that way." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Julian sank into a chair across from her. His legs would not hold him anymore. The reality of the situation was settling in, layer by layer, each revelation heavier than the last. "Why?" he managed. "How?" "Vivienne, you were on the pill. We were careful. And even if you got pregnant, why would you not tell me? 6 years. 6 years of her life, and I did not know she existed." Vivienne's laugh held no humor. "You want to have this conversation now, here, in front of her." She gestured toward Mira, who was still absorbed in the window view but obviously listening to every word. "Because I can give you the answer, but it will not be pretty." "She is already listening," Julian replied, "and she deserves to know the truth. Maybe not all of it, but enough. I will not build whatever comes next on lies." Something shifted in Vivienne's expression. Surprise, perhaps. She had not expected him to acknowledge the child's presence in the conversation, to treat her as a participant rather than a prop. "Fine." She leaned back against the sofa. "You want to know why I did not tell you? Let me ask you something first. Do you remember the gallery opening? June, 6 years ago." Julian remembered. Of course he remembered. The Meridian Gallery, Vivienne's debut exhibition, her first independent collection after years of working under other designers. It had been the culmination of her dreams, the night she would finally step into her own spotlight. And he had not been there. "The merger," he said quietly. "The merger," Vivienne confirmed. "Celeste Park and her tech conglomerate. Do you remember what you told me when I called you from the hospital?" Julian's stomach turned. He had received that call, Vivienne, voice shaky, telling him she had collapsed during her own exhibition, that she was in the emergency room, that she did not know what was wrong, that she was scared and alone and needed him, and he had been across town finalizing partnership terms with Celeste Park. Terms that could not wait, his lawyer had insisted. Terms that would double Axiom's market value. "I told you I would send flowers." Julian's voice emerged broken. "I told you I would be there the next day." "You sent roses," Vivienne said, "a dozen red roses and an apology note. Do you know what I was doing when those roses arrived? I was lying in a hospital bed, getting IV fluids because I had worked myself into exhaustion, and I was wondering how I had ended up with a man who would choose a business dinner over my worst moment. I came the next day." "No, you did not. Celeste invited you to Singapore for extended negotiations. 3 weeks turned into 6. By the time you got back, I had already moved out. I had already found out I was pregnant, and I had already made my decision." The truth landed with the weight of a collapsing building. Julian had convinced himself over the years that he had tried, that he had made an effort, but sitting here now, forced to confront the actual sequence of events, he saw his own narrative for what it was. Comfortable fiction designed to protect his ego. "I tried calling." he said weakly. I tried to find you. You tried for about 2 weeks. Then you got busy with the Singapore expansion. Then you started dating Celeste. Then 3 months passed and I realized you were not actually looking for me. You had just wanted to feel like you tried. Julian flinched. Celeste Park, another mistake in a chain of mistakes. A relationship that had looked perfect on paper and felt hollow in reality. It had lasted 18 months before they both admitted they were better as business partners than romantic ones. That ended years ago. I know. I follow industry news. I know everything about your life, Julian. Your company's growth, your awards, your philanthropic ventures. I know you built exactly what you said you would build. I also know you did it alone, that everyone who gets close to you eventually leaves, that you have not had a relationship lasting longer than a year since we ended. Are you enjoying this? Julian asked, cataloging my failures. No. Vivienne's voice softened slightly. I am explaining why I made the choice I made. You were not capable of prioritizing another person, Julian. Not then. Maybe not even now. I was pregnant with your child, and I had just watched you choose a business deal over my medical emergency. How could I trust you with something as important as a baby? How could I build a life with someone who treated me like an item on his to-do list? I would have changed. You did not change for me. You did not change when I begged you to be more present in our relationship. You did not change when I told you I felt like I was dating a company instead of a person. Why would a baby suddenly transform you? Because it is different, Julian insisted. A child, my child, that is not. He stopped, because he was about to say that it was not the same as a relationship, that a child was more important, and if he said that out loud he would be proving her exact point. Vivienne watched him reach this realization, watched it dawn across his face. There was no satisfaction in her expression, only the weariness of someone who had stopped expecting better a long time ago. I was not going to raise my daughter wondering why her father never showed up, she said quietly. I was not going to watch her wait by the window for a man who might or might not come depending on his schedule. I knew what you were, Julian. I loved you anyway, for years, hoping you would become something different. But when I found out I was pregnant, hoping was not enough anymore. I had to be realistic. I had to protect her from disappointment. So you protected her from me entirely. I protected her from uncertainty. I protected her from the confusion of a part-time father who appeared and disappeared based on business cycles. I protected her from becoming an obligation on your calendar instead of the center of someone's world. And you never considered that I might change, that knowing about her might. Change what? Vivienne cut him off. Change you into a different person. People do not change that fundamentally, Julian. They evolve around the edges maybe. They adjust their habits, but the core of who they are, that stays the same. You are someone who prioritizes achievement over connection. That is who you have always been. Then why are you here tonight? The question stopped her. Vivienne looked away, toward the window where Mira was now drawing invisible pictures on the glass. Because circumstances changed, she finally said. My foundation is expanding. I am taking on investors for the first time. When this goes public, the media will dig into my history. They will find out about you. They will find out why I left New York 6 years ago. They will find out about Mira. So, you are here to control the narrative. I am here because I was invited to support a charity I believe in. Running into you was not part of the plan. But since it has happened, yes, I am thinking about how to handle the publicity. I am thinking about what story the world will believe. Julian studied her, this woman he had loved and lost and apparently never known as well as he thought. She had become someone formidable in his absence, someone who thought 3 moves ahead, someone who did not wait for the world to happen to her. What are my options? He asked. Excuse me, in your narrative. Julian leaned forward. What are the versions of this story you are willing to tell? Because if I have a choice, I want to be more than a footnote. I want to be her father. Something flickered in Vivienne's eyes. Surprise again, or maybe hope, quickly suppressed. You do not know her, Vivienne said carefully. You have spent 6 minutes with her. You cannot possibly know if you want to be her father. I know she has my eyes, Julian replied. I know she speaks in poetry. I know she is observant and thoughtful and direct. I know she is wearing a dress her mother made because her mother is extraordinary and she knows it. I know I missed 6 years of her life, and that is 6 years I can never get back. But I can be here now. I can show up now. If you will let me try." Vivienne was silent for a long moment. Across the room, Mira had stopped drawing on the window. She was watching them again with that unnerving perceptiveness. "Mama," she said quietly, "is he going to be my dad now?" The question hung in the air. Julian felt his heart beating in his throat. Everything depended on this moment. Everything depended on what Vivienne would say. "That is what we are trying to figure out, baby." Vivienne answered carefully. "It is complicated. Adults always say things are complicated when they do not want to explain." Mira observed, "I am 6, not stupid." Despite everything, Julian felt a smile tug at his lips. "You are absolutely right. You deserve a real answer." He looked at Vivienne, asking permission with his eyes. She hesitated, then gave the slightest nod. "The truth is," Julian said, turning to face his daughter fully, "I did not know you existed until about 15 minutes ago. Your mom and I had a relationship that ended badly. When she found out she was pregnant, she made the decision not to tell me. That was her choice to make. I understand why she made it, but I wish things had been different." Mira processed this with visible concentration. "Why did the relationship end badly?" "Because I made mistakes," Julian answered without hesitation. "I was selfish. I chose work over your mother when she needed me. I hurt her. That is not her perception or opinion. It is fact." "Were you mean?" "Yes. I was careless with her feelings. I was not there when I should have been there." Mira turned to Vivienne. "Is that true?" "Yes, baby. It is true." Mira looked back and forth between them, evaluating. Then she nodded slowly, as if reaching a conclusion. "Okay," she said. "So, you were mean before, and Mama left, and she did not tell you about me, because she thought you would be mean to me too." "That is a very accurate summary," Vivienne said quietly. "But now you know," Mira continued, addressing Julian. "So what are you going to do about it?" Julian felt the weight of the question settle over him. What was he going to do? What could he possibly do to make up for 6 years of absence? What could he offer this child that would mean anything? "I would like to get to know you," he said honestly. "If you and your mother will let me, I would like to be part of your life. I cannot change the past. I cannot get back the years I missed. But I can try to be here for whatever comes next." Mira considered this. "And if I do not want you to, then I will respect that." Julian forced the words out, even though they hurt. "But I hope you will give me a chance." Mira turned to Vivienne. "What do you think, Mama?" "I think," Vivienne said slowly, "that everyone deserves a chance to prove they have changed. But I also think trust has to be earned. It cannot just be given because someone asks nicely." Mira nodded solemnly. "Okay." She turned back to Julian. "You can try, but I am going to be watching you. Mama taught me how to watch people carefully because not everyone means what they say." Julian felt something break and rebuild inside him simultaneously. This tiny person, this child he had not known existed an hour ago, was offering him a chance, a conditional, guarded, watchful chance. It was more than he deserved. "Thank you," he said. "I will do my best to earn your trust." "We will see," Mira replied. "That is what Mama always says. We will see, and then we will know." Before we continue with this story, and trust me, what happens next is going to test everything Julian thinks he knows about redemption, I need to ask you something. If you have ever been hurt by someone who chose convenience over commitment, or if you have ever been the one who made that choice and lived with the regret, this story is for you. Hit that like button right now, not because I am asking, but because stories like this need to be heard. Subscribe if you have not already because we are just getting started. And in the comments below, tell me this. Do you think some mistakes are too big to fix? I want to know what you believe. Now, let us see what happens when Julian finally begins to understand what he destroyed and what it will take to rebuild. The conversation that followed was unlike any negotiation Julian had ever conducted. And he had conducted hundreds. Billion-dollar deals, corporate takeovers, international partnerships that shaped entire industries. None of them had prepared him for negotiating access to his own daughter. "Here are my terms," Vivienne said, her voice taking on the precise quality of someone who had thought through every contingency. "And they are not open for discussion." Julian nodded. He had expected this. Vivienne had always been strategic, even when they were together. The woman who could launch a fashion empire from nothing was not going to approach this situation without a plan. "First," Vivienne began, "I will not move back to New York. Our life is in Boston. Mira has friends, school, a routine. If you want to be part of her life, you come to us, not the other way around. I can do that. Second, any visits are supervised until I decide otherwise. That means I am present. My best friend Camille might be present, but you do not take her anywhere alone. You do not pick her up from school. You do not have access to her without me knowing exactly where she is and what she is doing. Julian wanted to protest. He was her father, but he forced himself to remember Vivienne's perspective. To her, he was a stranger who had already proven himself unreliable. Of course, she would not trust him alone with her child. I understand, he said. Whatever it takes. Third, no excessive gifts. She is not for sale, and you cannot buy your way into her affection. Any gift over $20 needs to be discussed with me first. Reasonable. Fourth, Vivienne's eyes hardened. If you commit to this, you commit completely. You do not get to show up when it is convenient and disappear when work gets demanding. You do not get to let her down the way you let me down. If you start building a relationship with her and then abandon it, I will make sure you never get another chance. Do you understand me? Yes, because she is 6 years old, Julian. She does not have the emotional armor that adults build. If she lets you in and you hurt her, the damage will not be something she can rationalize or process. It will shape how she trusts people for the rest of her life. I understand the stakes. Do you? Vivienne leaned forward. Do you really? Because 6 years ago, you understood that I needed you to be at the hospital, and you went to a business dinner anyway. Understanding and acting on that understanding are two different things. The accusation landed where she intended it to. Julian absorbed the impact without deflecting. You are right, he said quietly. My track record does not inspire confidence. I can only tell you that this is different. That she is different. That knowing she exists has changed something fundamental in how I see my own life. Pretty words. Vivienne observed. I have heard your pretty words before. Then let me prove them with actions. He met her eyes directly. Set whatever conditions you need. Create whatever structure makes you feel safe. I will operate within it. I will earn your trust inch by inch if that is what it takes. Vivienne studied him for a long moment, looking, he suspected, for cracks in his sincerity, for signs that this was performance rather than genuine transformation. We start with monthly visits, she finally said. You come to Boston, you spend the day with us, you go home. If that goes well for 3 months, we can discuss increasing frequency. You can call her once a week for video chats, but I monitor those calls. If at any point she seems distressed or uncomfortable, the call ends immediately. Agreed. I am going to have my lawyer draw up documentation, not custody arrangements, not yet, but something that establishes your acknowledgement of paternity and my primary parental rights. I need legal protection, Julian. I need to know that you cannot suddenly decide to fight me for custody because you got bored with visiting and want to prove a point. I would never do that. 6 years ago, you would never have abandoned your pregnant girlfriend either. But here we are. The words stung because they were accurate. Julian had no defense against his own history. I will sign whatever you need, he said. Whatever makes you comfortable. Vivienne nodded slowly. There is one more thing. She glanced at Mira, who had returned to drawing on the window, seemingly absorbed in her artwork, but undoubtedly still listening. Celeste Park. Is she still in your life? No, Julian answered immediately. That ended 4 years ago. It was a mistake from the beginning. I think I knew that even while it was happening. I do not care about your romantic history, Vivienne clarified. I care about who has access to my daughter. Celeste will never be anywhere near Mira. Neither will anyone else from your life until I have met them and approved. She will not be. I promise. Your promises. Vivienne's smile held no warmth. Let us see how those hold up over the next few months. They spent another hour working out logistics. Julian's contact information, Vivienne's schedule, Mira's school calendar, the best times for video calls, the procedure for handling emergencies. It was the most important meeting Julian had ever attended, and he gave it every ounce of his attention. By the time they finished, Mira had fallen asleep on one of the velvet sofas, her crystal shoes still on her feet as she had insisted. She is going to be exhausted tomorrow, Vivienne said softly, looking at her daughter. She is beautiful, Julian replied. They are both beautiful in the same way, he realized. That combination of strength and grace that made you want to watch them and also made you slightly afraid. Yes, Vivienne stood, gathering her clutch. She is the best thing I have ever done. The best thing I will ever do. Julian stood as well. There was so much more he wanted to say. Apologies that felt inadequate. Questions about the 6 years he had missed. Stories he wanted to hear about Mira's first words, first steps, first everything. But Vivienne had set terms, and he would operate within them. "Can I carry her to your car?" he asked. "Please." Vivienne hesitated. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. "Be careful. Her neck does not have full support when she sleeps." Julian approached his sleeping daughter with something like reverence. He had held babies before, at family functions, friends' children. But this was different. This was his child, his daughter. This small human contained half of his DNA, half of his history, half of whatever legacy he might leave behind. He lifted her gently, cradling her against his chest. She made a small sound but did not wake, her head nestling into the curve of his shoulder as if it belonged there. Something in Julian's chest contracted painfully. 6 years. He had missed 6 years of this. 6 years of bedtime stories and first days of school and birthday candles and scraped knees and terrible jokes and proud moments and ordinary Tuesday afternoons. He could not get those years back, but he could make sure he did not miss any more. They made their way through the hotel, past the remnants of the gala, past the curious stares of late-night guests. Julian carried Mira as if she were made of glass, afraid to jostle her, afraid to disturb her sleep. Vivienne's car was waiting in the underground parking garage. A driver stood beside a black SUV, clearly expecting them. "I did not drive," Vivienne explained. "It seemed easier for tonight." Julian nodded. Of course she had planned for this. Of course she had anticipated needing an exit strategy. He settled Mira into the car seat that was already installed, fumbling slightly with the straps. Vivienne did not help. She watched him figure it out, testing whether he could manage even this basic task. He managed, barely. When he stepped back, Vivienne was waiting by the driver's door. "I will call you tomorrow," she said, "to work out the details for your first visit." "Thank you." Julian wanted to say more, wanted to find words that would somehow convey the magnitude of what he was feeling. But everything felt inadequate. "Do not thank me yet," Vivienne replied. "You have not proven anything yet. This is not redemption, Julian. This is a chance. What you do with it determines everything." She got into the car. The driver closed her door. Through the tinted window, Julian could see the outline of his sleeping daughter. Then the SUV pulled away, and Julian was left standing alone in the parking garage, his entire world rearranged and himself utterly uncertain of what came next. He did not know how long he stood there, long enough for the adrenaline to fade, long enough for the reality to settle in layers. He had a daughter. He had missed her entire existence, and he had been given one chance, one conditional chance, to become something worth knowing. His phone buzzed. "Dominic." "Sir, are you all right? You have been gone for 3 hours." Julian looked at the time. It was nearly midnight. The gala would be ending soon. The ice sculptures would be melting. The guests would be gathering coats and calling cars. And Julian Mercer, who had arrived at the party hollow and alone, was leaving as a father. "I need you to clear my schedule," he texted back. "For the foreseeable future. We are restructuring everything." The reply came quickly. "Everything, sir. Everything." Julian confirmed. "And start researching child development, parenting resources, whatever the best practices are for building relationships with children who did not know you existed." There was a pause. Then Dominic replied with characteristic professionalism. "Understood, sir. I will have a preliminary report ready by morning." Julian put his phone away. He walked to his own car, parked in a reserved spot near the elevator. He sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. "You have one chance," he told himself. "Do not destroy it." Then he started the car and drove home through Manhattan streets that had never looked so different. His penthouse, when he arrived, was exactly as he had left it. Pristine, expensive, empty. He walked through rooms designed by professionals, filled with art he had purchased as investments, decorated in colors he had approved from swatches. None of it meant anything. None of it had ever meant anything. He had built a monument to success and forgotten to put anything alive inside it. Julian poured himself a drink, then set it down without tasting it. He stood at his window, looking out at the same Manhattan skyline that Mira had seen from the hotel lounge. The buildings looked like fallen stars that forgot how to float. His daughter saw poetry in the world. What did that say about him, that his first thought about any building was its market value? He needed to change, not at the edges, not in habits, at the core. Everything Vivienne had said about him was true, and that truth had cost him 6 years with his daughter. He would not let it cost him another day. The flight home to Boston felt longer than usual, even though the private jet was the same one Vivienne had been using for 2 years now. One of the perks of building a successful fashion empire, commercial airlines with their delays and cramped seats were no longer something she had to endure. Mira slept most of the way, worn out by the evening's events. Vivienne sat across from her, watching her daughter's peaceful face, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that might happen next. She had planned for this day. Not consciously perhaps, but somewhere in the back of her mind, she had always known it would come. The world was too small for secrets to last forever. Julian was too prominent a figure for their paths to never cross again. And Mira was too curious, too perceptive, to go her whole life without asking questions about her father. So Vivienne had prepared. She had documentation ready, legal frameworks drafted, talking points rehearsed. She had imagined this conversation 100 different ways, war-gamed every possible response. What she had not prepared for was Julian's reaction. She had expected denial, or anger, or worse, dismissal. The Julian she remembered had been brilliant at compartmentalizing, at putting inconvenient emotions in boxes and forgetting they existed. She had expected him to treat this revelation the way he treated business problems, as something to be managed, delegated, optimized. Instead, he had crouched down to Mira's level. He had answered her questions honestly. He had accepted Vivienne's terms without negotiation. He had carried their sleeping daughter to the car as if she were made of something precious. It terrified her, because if Julian was capable of that, if he had always been capable of that, then what did that mean? Had she been wrong to keep Mira from him? Had she stolen 6 years of fatherhood from a man who might have risen to the occasion? Or was this just performance? Julian had always been good at performances, at saying the right things, at making people believe he was present when he was actually calculating exits. Vivienne did not know, and the not knowing was the worst part. Her phone buzzed. A text from Camille. "Are you okay? I saw the society posts." Who was that child? Vivienne stared at the message. Society posts. Of course, in the age of social media, nothing happened without being documented. Someone had photographed her with Mira. Someone had photographed Julian's broken champagne glass, his approach, their departure together. By morning, every gossip site in New York would be speculating. She typed back, "I will explain everything when I land. It is complicated." Camille's response was immediate. "Is the child his?" Vivienne did not answer. The answer was obvious. The plane landed at 2 in the morning. Camille was waiting at the private terminal, her expression a mixture of concern and barely contained fury. 6 years, she said, as soon as Vivienne was within earshot. 6 years we have kept her safe from that man. And now what? He knows. He saw her. He was at the gala. Vivienne shifted Mira's sleeping weight in her arms. "I did not plan this. What did he say? What does he want?" "He wants to be her father." Camille laughed, harsh and humorless. "Of course he does. Now that she is already raised and the hard work is done. Now that you have already sacrificed everything to give her a good life. Now he wants to show up and play daddy. It is not that simple, is it not?" Camille took Mira from Vivienne's arms, handling her with the ease of someone who had helped raise her since infancy. "Tell me how it is not that simple." Vivienne looked at her best friend. Camille had been there through everything. The pregnancy, which Vivienne had spent hiding from the world. The birth, which Camille had coached her through when the epidural failed. The early years, when Vivienne had been building her company from nothing, while simultaneously learning how to be a mother. Camille had never liked Julian. Even before the betrayal, she had seen something in him that worried her. After the betrayal, her dislike had hardened into hatred. "He has changed," Vivienne said, and immediately regretted the words. "People do not change. Then maybe I was wrong about who he was." Camille stopped walking. She turned to face Vivienne fully, Mira still sleeping in her arms. "Do you hear yourself? Do you hear what you are saying?" 6 years ago, that man abandoned you in a hospital to close a business deal. He chose money over your health. He chose his career over your relationship. He chose a different woman over you before the sheets were even cold. And now, because he said some pretty words and looked sad, you are ready to believe he is different. I am not ready to believe anything. Vivienne's voice sharpened. I am giving him a chance to prove himself because Mira deserves to know her father if he can be worth knowing. That is not the same as trust. That is not the same as forgiveness. It is opportunity, with conditions. Camille studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed and resumed walking toward the car. Fine, she said, but I am watching him, and when he fails, because he will fail, I will be here to help you pick up the pieces. Again, Vivienne did not argue. She was not sure she disagreed. They drove home in silence, Mira's soft breathing the only sound in the car. By the time they reached the townhouse, Vivienne was exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that went beyond physical tiredness into something deeper. She had spent 6 years building a life that did not include Julian Mercer. She had convinced herself that was the right choice, the only choice, the choice that protected her daughter from disappointment. Now that certainty was crumbling. She carried Mira to bed, tucking her under the purple comforter she had picked out herself. She stood in the doorway of her daughter's room, looking at the walls covered with drawings, and the shelves lined with books and the small desk where Mira did her homework with such fierce concentration. This life was good. This life was safe. Mira was happy, healthy, loved, but she was also half Julian, and maybe, possibly, that half deserved acknowledgement. Vivienne went to her own room and collapsed onto her bed without changing out of her gown. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about second chances, about whether some mistakes were too big to fix, about the look on Julian's face when he saw Mira for the first time. He had been devastated, not angry, not defensive, devastated, and he had not tried to argue with her accusations, had not minimized his failures, had simply accepted them and asked for a chance to do better. Maybe that was just manipulation, a strategic approach to getting what he wanted. Or maybe people could change after all. Vivienne did not know. She would not know for months, maybe years. The only way to find out was to let the situation unfold and watch carefully. She was very good at watching carefully. She had learned to be. Her phone buzzed one more time before she fell asleep. A text from an unknown number. Thank you again for tonight. I meant everything I said. I will prove it. Julian. Vivienne stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back. Actions, not words. See you in Boston. Short, professional, giving nothing away, exactly as it should be. She set her phone down and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tomorrow, she would have to explain to Mira what was happening. Tomorrow, she would have to start building a framework for Julian's involvement that protected her daughter while still giving him a fair chance. Tonight, she would just survive, the way she had been surviving for 6 years, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one small act of courage after another. That was how you built a life worth living. That was how you turned devastation into something beautiful. Vivienne had done it once. She could do it again, even if this time she was not doing it alone. The morning after Valentine's night arrived too quickly. Vivienne woke to the sound of small feet padding across hardwood floors, and before she could fully open her eyes, Mira was climbing onto her bed. Mama. Mira's voice was serious, the voice she used when she had been thinking about something important. I have questions. Vivienne pushed herself upright, still wearing last night's gown, her hair a tangled mess against the pillows. The morning light was cruel and honest, and she felt every hour of sleep she had missed. What kind of questions, baby? About the man. Mira settled cross-legged on the bed, her purple pajamas twisted from sleep. About Julian. He is really my father. Yes, he really is. Mira absorbed this with the gravity of someone considering a major life decision. Why does he have my eyes? You have his eyes, Vivienne corrected gently. You got them from him, the same way you got your hair color from me. Oh, Mira touched her own face, as if trying to feel the inheritance. Do I have other things from him? Probably. Vivienne reached out to smooth her daughter's hair. The way you think about problems, maybe. The way you remember everything. He was always very smart and very focused. Are you smart and focused too? I like to think so. Then how do you know which parts are from him and which parts are from you? Vivienne smiled despite her exhaustion. I do not always know. That is one of the mysterious things about having a baby. You mix two people together, and something entirely new comes out. You are not just me or just him. You are you. Mira considered this. But if he is my father, why did I not know him before? Other kids at school have fathers. They have known them their whole lives. And here it was, the conversation Vivienne had been preparing for and dreading in equal measure. She took a breath and reached for her daughter's hands. Do you remember what we talked about last night? About how Julian and I had a relationship that ended badly because he was mean to you, because he made choices that hurt me. Yes, when I found out I was going to have you, I was already very sad about those choices. I was scared that if I told him about you, he might make the same kinds of choices again. And I did not want you to be hurt the way I was hurt. Mira's forehead creased. But he seemed sorry. Last night, he seemed really sorry. He might be. Vivienne kept her voice measured. Sometimes people are sorry and they change. Sometimes people are sorry and they stay the same. The only way to know which one is true is to watch what they do, not just listen to what they say. So we are going to watch him. Yes. For a while. He is going to visit us, and we are going to see if he can be the kind of father you deserve. If he can be kind and consistent and present. If he shows up when he says he will show up. And if he does not, then we will know and we will adjust. But baby, I want you to understand something. No matter what happens with Julian, you have a family. You have me. You have Aunt Camille. You have your friends and your teachers and everyone who loves you. A father is not something you need to be complete. He is something you might gain, but you are already whole without him. Mira was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she nodded with that decisive quality that always reminded Vivienne of herself. Okay, she said, I will watch him, and I will decide. That sounds like a very good plan. Mira uncrossed her legs and scooted closer to Vivienne, tucking herself under her mother's arm. Can we have pancakes now? Vivienne laughed, the tension breaking. Absolutely. Chocolate chip or blueberry. Both. Both it is. They made pancakes together, Mira standing on her step stool to help mix the batter, and the normalcy of it soothed something in Vivienne that had been raw since the night before. This was their life, their rhythm. Whatever happened with Julian, this foundation would not change. But as she flipped pancakes and listened to Mira chatter about her upcoming week at school, Vivienne could not stop thinking about the months ahead. The visits, the video calls, the slow integration of a stranger into their carefully constructed world. She had given Julian a chance. Now she had to live with that choice. 3,000 miles away, Julian Mercer was not sleeping at all. He sat in his home office as dawn broke over Manhattan, surrounded by documents and research that Dominic had somehow compiled in the hours since the gala ended. Child development literature, parenting best practices, articles about building relationships with children you did not raise, case studies of fathers who had successfully reconnected with estranged children. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was a starting point. His phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, most from business associates wondering why he had disappeared from the gala without explanation. The society pages had already picked up the story. Tech billionaire's mysterious exit, who is the mystery woman and child? He ignored all of it. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was the photograph he had pulled up on his computer. A screenshot from Holloway Lux's website, the About Us page. Vivienne's professional headshot smiled back at him, polished and confident. The bio described her as a visionary designer committed to sustainable luxury and empowering women in fashion. She had built all of this without him. While he was acquiring companies and expanding markets, she was creating something meaningful, something with purpose beyond profit. And she had done it while raising their daughter alone. The shame of that realization was physical. It sat in his chest like a stone, heavy and immovable. His phone rang. Gregory Mercer, his father. Julian considered ignoring it, then decided that was the old pattern. The old Julian avoided difficult conversations. The new Julian, if there was going to be a new Julian, would face them. Father, what the hell happened last night? Gregory's voice was sharp, the tone of a man who did not tolerate surprises. I have been fielding calls all morning. People are saying you left the Hartwell Gala with some woman and child, that you looked like you had seen a ghost, that you have not answered any communication since. That is all accurate. Explain. Julian took a breath. I have a daughter. She is 6 years old. I did not know she existed until last night. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Gregory Mercer was not a man who was often rendered speechless. A daughter, he finally said. With whom? Vivienne Holloway. You remember her? The designer. The one who walked out on you 6 years ago. She did not walk out on me, Julian corrected quietly. I pushed her away. I chose work over her during a medical emergency. I was in Singapore when she found out she was pregnant. By the time I came back, she was gone. And she never told you. She had her reasons. They were good reasons. Another long pause. Then Gregory spoke with the cold precision that had made him a legendary corporate attorney. You need to get ahead of this. Control the narrative. If she is after money or leverage, we need to know now. I will have my team run a background check. We should also consider whether the child is actually yours. DNA testing is standard in these situations. No. Julian felt something harden inside him. Something that had been soft and uncertain crystallizing into certainty. I am not running background checks on the mother of my child. I am not demanding DNA tests to prove what I already know is true. I am not treating this like a hostile acquisition. Then what are you treating it like? Like the most important thing that has ever happened to me. Gregory made a dismissive sound. Julian, you are emotional. You have had a shock. That is understandable. But you cannot let sentiment cloud your judgment. You have built a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You have responsibilities, shareholders, a reputation to protect. I know what I have built, Father. I also know what it cost me. I spent 6 years becoming you, and I lost the only woman I ever loved in the process. I missed the birth of my daughter. Her first words, her first steps, 6 years of her life gone because I prioritized exactly what you taught me to prioritize. The words hung in the air between them, more honest than anything Julian had said to his father in years. Gregory's voice when he responded was ice. I taught you to succeed. I taught you to build something that lasts. If you threw away a relationship in the process, that was your choice, not my instruction. You taught me that emotions were weakness. That connection was distraction. That the only thing that mattered was achievement. I learned those lessons perfectly, Father. And now I have a daughter who does not know me because of them. This conversation is unproductive, maybe, but it is also true. I am going to be part of my daughter's life. I am going to earn her trust and her mother's trust, and I am going to do it properly, not through lawyers and background checks and hostile tactics. If that disappoints you, I can live with that. He ended the call before Gregory could respond. His hands were shaking. He had never spoken to his father that way, had never pushed back against the worldview that had shaped his entire adult life. It felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. But he had jumped, and there was no going back. The first video call was scheduled for Sunday evening, 6 days after the gala. Julian prepared for it the way he used to prepare for board meetings, which meant obsessively and with extensive notes. Dominic had provided him with research on age-appropriate conversation topics for 6-year-olds, favorite activities, common interests, questions that invited engagement without being intrusive. Julian had read all of it and retained none of it because none of it told him how to be a father to a stranger. At 7 o'clock Boston time, his laptop pinged with the incoming call. He accepted immediately, and suddenly there she was. Mira, his daughter, sitting at what appeared to be a kitchen table, wearing a purple sweater that matched her favorite color, her dark hair pulled back in 2 braids. Vivienne was visible in the background, pretending to do something at the counter while obviously listening to every word. Hi, Julian said, and immediately felt idiotic. 6 years of business negotiations, and all he could manage was hi. Hi, Mira replied. She studied him through the camera with that analytical gaze he was beginning to recognize. You look different on the computer than you did in person. Different how? Smaller. In person you were very tall. Now you fit in a box. Julian almost laughed. That is true. Computers do make people smaller. Mama says you want to talk to me. I do. If that is okay with you. Mira considered this. What do you want to talk about? And here Julian's preparation failed him completely. He could not remember a single age-appropriate conversation topic. His mind was blank, filled with nothing but the desperate desire not to fail this test. I do not know, he admitted honestly. I have never done this before. What do you usually talk about? Lots of things. Mira seemed to appreciate his honesty. I talk about school, and my drawings, and the stories I make up, and the bugs I find in the garden, and what I want to be when I grow up, and whether aliens are real, and why the sky is blue. And that is a lot of topics. I like talking. Mira shrugged. Mama says I could talk to a brick wall and the wall would start talking back. Julian smiled, his first genuine smile in days. I bet you could. What is your favorite thing to talk about? Right now. Dragons. Dragons. Tell me about dragons. And she did. For the next 15 minutes, Mira explained her elaborate dragon mythology. The different types of dragons categorized by color, their abilities and weaknesses, the kingdoms they protected, the alliances they formed. It was complex and imaginative, and delivered with the absolute confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were talking about. Julian listened. Not the way he listened in meetings, cataloging information for strategic use, but the way you listen to music, the way you listen to rain, just receiving, without agenda. You know a lot about dragons, he said when she paused for breath. I made it all up. Mira clarified. None of it is real. But that is okay because making things up is called imagination, and imagination is important. Who told you that? Mama, and my teacher, and the books. Everybody knows that. Everybody should know that. But sometimes adults forget. Do you forget? Julian considered the question seriously. I think I forgot a lot of things. I was very focused on work for a long time. Work does not require much imagination. What kind of work do you do? I build computer programs. They help people do things faster and better. Like robots, sort of. More like the brains that make robots smart. Mira's eyes widened. Can you make a robot dragon? Julian laughed. The first real laugh in longer than he could remember. Probably not. But that is a very good idea. Maybe you should design one when you grow up. Maybe I will. Mira smiled, and it was like watching the sun come out. You're not as scary as I thought. You thought I was scary. A little. Mama was nervous about you. When Mama is nervous, I know something is serious. But you just listen and ask questions. That is not scary at all. Julian glanced at the background, where Vivienne had gone very still. Their eyes met through the camera, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe. Or the first fragile thread of trust. I am glad I am not scary, Julian said, returning his attention to Mira. I would like to be someone you feel comfortable talking to. You have to earn that, Mira said, echoing what her mother had obviously taught her. But you are doing okay so far. Thank you. That means a lot. The 15-minute timer Vivienne had set went off. Mira looked disappointed. That is all the time for tonight, she said. But you can call again next week if you want. I would like that very much. Okay. Bye, Julian. Goodbye, Mira. The call ended. Julian sat staring at his laptop screen, at the place where his daughter's face had been, feeling something he could not name. Something between joy and grief, between hope and terror. He had talked to his daughter. For 15 minutes he had been her father. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was a beginning. The video calls continued every Sunday. 15 minutes expanded to 20, then 30 as Mira became more comfortable. She showed Julian her drawings through the camera, elaborate scenes of dragons and castles and kingdoms at war. She told him about school, about her best friend Sophie, about the boy in her class who ate glue, and the teacher who let them have extra recess when the weather was nice. Julian learned the rhythm of her speech. The way she talked faster when she was excited, slower when she was thinking through something complicated. The phrases she repeated from her mother. The unique observations that were entirely her own. He also learned about her life in ways that made his absence feel more acute. She had taken her first steps in the kitchen of Vivienne's old apartment. Her first word had been book, which Camille claimed as a personal victory since she had been reading to Mira constantly since birth. Her favorite birthday had been her 4th, when Vivienne had organized a princess tea party and all her friends had come in costume. He had missed all of it. Every milestone, every ordinary moment, every bedtime story and skinned knee and nightmare soothed away. But he was here now, and he was not going anywhere. The first in-person visit was scheduled for the last weekend of March, 6 weeks after the gala. Julian flew to Boston on a Friday afternoon, checked into a hotel Vivienne had approved, and spent the evening reviewing his notes like a student preparing for the most important exam of his life. The meeting point was a children's museum in downtown Boston. Neutral ground, public space, all of Vivienne's conditions satisfied. Julian arrived 15 minutes early. He stood outside the museum entrance, trying not to look as nervous as he felt, watching families stream past him. Fathers with children on their shoulders, mothers pushing strollers, grandparents holding small hands, ordinary scenes of ordinary families living ordinary lives. He had never wanted anything so badly in his entire existence. Then he saw them. Vivienne and Mira walking up the sidewalk hand in hand. Mira was wearing a yellow sundress and white sneakers, her hair loose around her shoulders. When she spotted Julian, her face split into a grin that made his heart stop. "You came," she said, breaking away from Vivienne to run toward him. "You actually came." Julian crouched down to catch her, and she launched herself into his arms with a force that nearly knocked him backward. She was warm and solid and smelled like strawberry shampoo. "Of course I came." He managed around the lump in his throat. "I said I would. Sometimes people say they will come, and then they do not." Mira pulled back to look at him seriously. "But you came. I will always come. When I say I will be somewhere, I will be there." Mira studied him with those gray-blue eyes, evaluating the promise. Then she nodded. "Okay, I believe you. For now." Behind her, Vivienne was watching this exchange with an expression Julian could not quite read. When their eyes met, she gave a small nod. Acknowledgement. Permission to continue. "Thank you," Julian mouthed. Vivienne did not respond, but she did not look away either. The museum was chaos, the best kind of chaos. Bright colors and interactive exhibits, and the constant soundtrack of children's laughter. Mira dragged Julian from station to station, explaining everything with the authority of someone who had been there many times before. "This is the bubble room. You can make giant bubbles if you hold the wand right. This is the construction zone. You can build things with real tools, but they are plastic, so it is safe. This is my favorite part. Come look." Her favorite part was an exhibit about space. A scaled model of the solar system hung from the ceiling, planets rotating slowly on invisible mechanisms. Mira stood beneath it, her face tilted up, her eyes reflecting the distant lights. "I want to go there someday," she said quietly. "To space. Mama says humans will probably live on Mars in my lifetime. Do you think that is true?" "I do not know." Julian stood beside her, looking up at the same artificial stars. "But I think if anyone could figure out how to get there, it might be you." Mira smiled. "You are just saying that because you do not know me very well yet. Maybe. Or maybe I can already tell that you are the kind of person who does not give up on things you want." "How can you tell that?" "Because you are still talking to me, even though you have every reason not to." Mira turned to look at him directly. She was quiet for a moment, processing. "Mama says giving people chances is important. She said that even when people hurt us, we should try to understand why. She said sometimes people do bad things because they are scared or confused or do not know any better. And sometimes they learn. Your mother is very wise. She is the wisest person I know." Mira paused. "But she also says that understanding is not the same as trusting. You can understand why someone did something and still not trust them to do better next time." "That makes sense. So I understand you." Mira continued with devastating simplicity. "You were scared or confused or did not know any better. You made choices that hurt Mama. Now you are trying to do better. I understand all of that, but you do not trust me yet. Not yet. But I am watching, and so far you are doing the things you said you would do. That is a good sign." Julian felt tears threatening and forced them back. He would not burden his 6-year-old daughter with his emotional breakdown. "Thank you for watching," he said. "Thank you for giving me the chance. You are welcome." Mira took his hand. "Now come on. There is a dinosaur exhibit, and you have not seen it yet." They spent 3 hours in the museum. Julian bought Mira a small model of Saturn in the gift shop, which Vivienne approved after verifying it cost under $20. They had lunch at a cafe next door, where Mira insisted on sitting next to Julian and showing him how to make a sandwich tower using the complimentary crackers. Through it all, Vivienne observed. She participated when Mira pulled her in, but mostly she watched Julian interact with their daughter, looking, he suspected, for signs of impatience or distraction, for evidence that this was performance rather than genuine engagement. He hoped she saw none of those things. He hoped she saw what he felt, which was overwhelming gratitude for every moment. For the chance to learn his daughter's favorite color was purple, and her favorite food was macaroni and cheese, and her favorite book was about a girl who discovered she could talk to animals. He hoped she saw him trying, because that was all he had, trying and hoping it would be enough. When the day ended, Mira hugged him goodbye with the same force she had greeted him with, her small arms wrapped around his neck, squeezing tight. "Will you come back?" she asked. "In 2 weeks," he promised, "and I will call you on Sunday, like always." "Good." She pulled back and looked at him seriously. "You did good today." Coming from her, it felt like the highest praise he had ever received. "I will keep trying," he said. "I know. That is why I'm starting to believe you might actually be different. I want to be different. For you." Mira nodded, satisfied. Then she took her mother's hand, and they walked away, leaving Julian standing on the sidewalk with a heart fuller than he had ever known it could be. He watched until they turned a corner and disappeared from view. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Dominic. "The visit went well. Clear my calendar for 2 weeks from now." "I am coming back." The pattern established itself over the following months. Video calls every Sunday, visits to Boston every 2 weeks. Each time Mira relaxed a little more, opened up a little more, trusted a little more. She showed him her school, standing outside the building and pointing to her classroom window on the 2nd floor. She introduced him to her favorite tree in the park, a massive oak she had named Theodore because she thought it looked wise. She made him taste her mother's cooking and laughed when he declared the pasta the best he had ever had. "I'm going to tell Mama you said that," she warned. "She will probably make you say it again. I will say it as many times as she wants." And slowly, cautiously, Julian began building something he had never had before. Not a deal or an acquisition or a strategic partnership. A relationship. Real and messy and terrifying and wonderful. Vivienne watched all of this with an expression he could not quite decipher. Sometimes he caught her almost smiling when he made Mira laugh. Other times, he saw her go still and guarded, as if expecting him to suddenly reveal that everything had been an act. He understood the suspicion. He had earned it through years of prioritizing everything except the people who mattered. The only way to undo that damage was time and consistency, 2 things he was prepared to give. But he would be lying if he said it did not hurt. To be so close to her and feel the distance she maintained. To remember what they had been and confront what they had become. 2 strangers co-parenting a child, their shared history a minefield neither dared enter. I need to pause here and speak directly to you. We are at a turning point in this story. Julian is making promises and starting to do the work. But the real question is not whether he can change for a week or a month. It is whether he can sustain that change when it gets hard, when work demands pile up, when it would be easier to send a gift than show up in person, when the woman he loves keeps him at arm's length and he has to accept it. If you have ever tried to change something fundamental about yourself or watched someone else try, you know how difficult this is. The first few weeks are fueled by motivation. The next few months are sustained by habit. But real transformation, the kind that lasts, requires something deeper. It requires changing not just what you do, but who you are. That is what Julian is attempting. And that is what we are about to witness. If this message is resonating with you, share this video with someone who needs to hear that transformation is possible, but it requires work. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because trust me, the next part of this story is where everything gets tested. Now let us see if Julian's words can become actions. 5 months after the Valentine's gala, Julian received a phone call that would test everything. He was in Boston, finishing up a weekend visit with Mira, when his phone buzzed with Dominic's name. Julian stepped away from the table where Mira was showing him her latest dragon drawing and answered, "What is it?" "Sir, there is a situation." Dominic's voice was tight with controlled urgency. "The Nakamura deal. It is collapsing." Julian felt ice slide down his spine. The Nakamura deal was the largest acquisition in Axiom's history. 9 months of negotiations, hundreds of millions of dollars. The foundation of their expansion into Asian markets. What happened? Their board is meeting in 48 hours to vote on whether to proceed. Our Japanese partners just informed me that there are concerns about your recent unavailability. They feel you have not been sufficiently present in the negotiations. They are considering pulling out. My unavailability, the Boston trip, sir, the reduced hours, the restructuring. It has been noticed. Julian closed his eyes. He had known this moment would come, had known he could not fundamentally change his priorities without consequences. He had simply hoped it would come later, when he was better prepared. What do they need? Your presence. In Tokyo. For at least a week, possibly 2. Starting immediately. Flights are available this evening. Julian looked back at the table, where Mira was carefully coloring a dragon's scales with her purple crayon. She looked up and smiled at him, and something in his chest cracked. No, sir. I am not flying to Tokyo tonight. Dominic was silent for a moment. With respect, sir, if you do not attend these meetings personally, the deal will almost certainly fail. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, years of strategic positioning, the company's entire Asian expansion. I understand the stakes. Then you understand why your presence is essential. Julian took a breath. He thought about his father's voice, cold and certain, telling him that success required sacrifice. That achievement demanded everything, that emotions were weakness and connection was distraction. He thought about Vivienne, lying alone in a hospital bed 6 years ago, waiting for him to choose her over a business dinner. He thought about all the years he had spent building an empire and calling it a life. Send Marcus, Julian said, and the senior negotiation team. Give them full authority to close the deal on my behalf. I will join them via video conference for any critical discussions. Sir, the Nakamura board specifically requested. Tell them I have a family emergency. Julian's voice hardened. Tell them my daughter needs me. Tell them whatever you have to tell them. But I am not leaving Boston tonight. This could cost the company the deal. Then it costs us the deal. Julian felt something settle inside him, a certainty he had not known he possessed. There will be other deals, other opportunities, other markets, but my daughter is only 6 once. I already missed 6 years. I am not missing any more. Another long pause. Then Dominic spoke with something that might have been respect. Understood, sir. I will handle the arrangements. Thank you, Dominic. Sir, one more thing. Yes, for what it is worth, I think you are making the right choice. Julian ended the call and returned to the table. Mira looked up from her drawing. Who was that? Someone from work. Do you have to leave? Julian sat down across from her and met her eyes directly. No. I am staying. But it sounded important. It was important. Julian reached across the table and took her small hand. But you are more important, and I am not going anywhere until our visit is over. Mira studied him for a long moment. Then her face broke into a smile that made every dollar he might lose worth it. That is good, she said, because I wanted to show you the new dragon I invented. She has rainbow scales and she can fly faster than anything. Tell me everything about her. And she did. For the next 2 hours, Julian sat at that kitchen table and listened to his daughter describe a creature that existed only in her imagination, and he did not think about Tokyo or stock prices or the empire he might be sacrificing. He thought about the look on Mira's face when he said he was staying. He thought about the feeling in his chest when she smiled at him. He thought about how, for the first time in his life, he had chosen right. Vivienne had been standing in the kitchen doorway, listening to his phone conversation. When he returned to the table without packing his bags, something shifted in her expression. Later that evening, after Mira had gone to bed, she found Julian in the living room, staring out the window at the Boston skyline. That sounded like a big deal, she said quietly. It was. And you stayed anyway. Julian turned to face her. Yes. Why? Because I meant what I said. Julian's voice was steady. I am not going to be the man who chooses work over the people who matter. I have been that man. I know where it leads. I know what it costs. I am not doing it anymore. Vivienne was silent for a long moment, her arms crossed over her chest, her expression unreadable. You might lose hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes. Does that not terrify you? It should, Julian admitted. But sitting in that conference room in Tokyo while Mira waits for a video call that does not come, that terrifies me more. Proving your suspicions right, that I will always choose work when it matters, that terrifies me more. I have enough money, Vivienne. What I do not have is time. With her, with you, if you will ever let me. The last words slipped out before he could stop them. Vivienne went very still. Julian, I know. He held up a hand. I know that is not what this is about. I know I have not earned the right to talk about us. I know trust takes time, and I am still proving myself. I am not asking for anything. I am just telling you the truth. The truth. that I never stopped loving you, that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life, and I have made a lot of mistakes, that every time I see you with Mira, every time I watch you be the incredible mother you are, I think about what I threw away, and I hate myself for it." Vivienne's eyes glistened in the dim light. "Julian, you do not have to respond," he said quickly. "You do not have to feel the same way. You do not have to feel anything. I just needed you to know, because I spent too many years not saying the important things, not being honest about what mattered. And I am not doing that anymore either." They stood in silence, the space between them charged with everything said and unsaid. Then Vivienne uncrossed her arms and took a single step toward him. "The deal," she said quietly. "What happened? I do not know yet. Marcus and the team are handling it. And if it fails, then it fails." Julian shrugged. "The company will survive. It might take a different form than I planned, but it will survive. And I will have been here, with Mira, where I should be." Vivienne studied him for a long moment, looking, he suspected, for signs of performance, for evidence that this was still the old Julian, saying what he needed to say to get what he wanted. He hoped she found none. He hoped she saw the man he was trying to become. "You are different," she finally said. It was not a question. "I am trying to be." She nodded slowly. "I see that. I've been seeing it for months. But Julian, I need you to understand something. Even if you have changed, even if this version of you is real and permanent, that does not mean we can go back to what we had. Too much has happened. Too much time has passed. I know. Do you?" "Yes." Julian met her eyes directly. "I am not asking to go back. I am asking if there is any chance of going forward. Not to what we were, but to something new. Something built on who we are now, not who we were then." Vivienne was quiet for so long that Julian began to fear he had pushed too hard, too fast, that he had ruined whatever fragile progress they had made. Then she spoke, and her voice was barely a whisper. "Ask me again in 6 months. 6 months. 6 months of continuing to show up. 6 months of proving this is not just a phase or a performance. 6 months of being the father Mira deserves and the person you are claiming to be." She paused. "If you can do that, if you can sustain this for 6 more months, then ask me again." It was not a yes. It was not even a maybe. But it was not a no. It was a chance. "I will be here," Julian promised. "In 6 months, and 6 years, and 60 years. However long it takes, I will be here." Vivienne nodded once. Then she turned and walked toward the stairs. "Good night, Julian." "Good night, Vivienne." He watched her go, his heart pounding with something that felt dangerously like hope. 6 months. He could do 6 months. He could do whatever it took. His phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. The Nakamura board agreed to the video conference. Marcus presented brilliantly. "Deal is proceeding with modifications. You were right to trust the team." Julian stared at the message, a laugh building in his chest. He had chosen his daughter over the deal, and the deal had survived anyway. Not perfectly, maybe. Not exactly as planned, but it had survived. Maybe that was the lesson. Maybe the world did not actually fall apart when you stopped sacrificing everything to hold it together. Maybe there was another way to live. He typed back a response. "Good work. We will discuss the modifications when I return. Right now, I am with my family." He set down the phone and looked back at the Boston skyline, at the city that had become a second home because his daughter lived here, at the house that contained the 2 people who mattered more than any empire he could build. 6 months, he repeated quietly. "I will be here." And he meant it. For the first time in his life, he completely meant it. The 6 months that followed were the most important of Julian's life, not because of what he achieved, but because of what he learned to let go of. He restructured Axiom Dynamics from the ground up, delegating responsibilities he had always insisted on handling personally. He promoted capable executives and trusted them to make decisions without his constant oversight. He reduced his working hours from 70 per week to 40, and the company did not collapse. If anything, it thrived under the distributed leadership model he had resisted for so long. He found a therapist in New York, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Patricia Webb, who had no patience for excuses or self-pity. In their weekly sessions, Julian excavated years of buried patterns. The lessons his father had taught him about success and sacrifice. The fear of inadequacy that drove his relentless ambition. The walls he had built to avoid vulnerability, walls that had ultimately isolated him from everyone he loved. It was uncomfortable work, painful work. Some sessions left him feeling hollowed out and raw, but it was necessary. He could not become someone different without first understanding who he had been and why. And every 2 weeks, without fail, he flew to Boston. The visits became the anchor of his new life. He built traditions with Mira, small rituals that belonged only to them. Saturday morning pancakes at the diner near Vivienne's house. Afternoon walks in the park where they collected interesting leaves and made up stories about the people they passed. Sunday evening hot chocolate before he flew back to New York. Mira blossomed under the consistency. She stopped testing him with questions about whether he would actually show up. She started calling him Dad naturally, the words slipping out without self-consciousness. She began sharing not just her achievements but her fears, her disappointments, the small heartbreaks of childhood that she had previously reserved only for her mother. He was present for her first lost tooth, which she insisted on keeping under her pillow, even though she was fairly certain the tooth fairy was actually Vivienne. He was present for her school play, sitting in a tiny auditorium chair and applauding louder than anyone when she delivered her single line with devastating seriousness. He was present for the afternoon she came home crying because her best friend Sophie had said something mean, and he held her while she sobbed and told her that sometimes people we love hurt us, and the hurt does not mean the love is not real. Vivienne watched all of this with an expression that gradually shifted from suspicion to something softer. She stopped hovering during his visits, trusting him to be alone with Mira for short periods. She started including him in decisions about their daughter's life, asking his opinion on school choices and extracurricular activities. She began to relax in his presence, the tension in her shoulders easing, the guardedness in her eyes dimming. They did not discuss their relationship. That conversation was still 6 months away, a marker on the horizon that Julian kept his eyes fixed on without mentioning. But the foundation was being laid, brick by careful brick, trust built through 1,000 small moments of keeping his word. One evening in late August, 5 months after their conversation, Julian sat on Vivienne's porch watching the sunset while Mira played in the backyard. Vivienne came outside with 2 glasses of lemonade and sat beside him. "She is happy," Vivienne said quietly, "happier than I have seen her in a long time." Julian watched his daughter chase fireflies in the fading light. "She is extraordinary. You raised her to be extraordinary. I raised her to survive." Vivienne took a sip of her lemonade. "You are teaching her to thrive. We are both teaching her things." Julian turned to look at Vivienne directly. That is what parents do. Vivienne met his eyes. There was something different in her gaze, something that made his heart rate quicken. "I owe you an apology," she said. "For what?" "For assuming you could not change, for deciding who you were and who you would always be without giving you the chance to prove me wrong." She paused. "You have been here for 5 months. Every visit, every call, every promise kept. You chose Mira over a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You stood up to your father. You restructured your entire life." "I had to," Julian said simply. "I did not have a choice." "That is not true. You had a choice. You just made a different one than I expected." She set down her glass. "I spent 6 years being so certain about you, so sure I knew exactly what you were capable of. And watching you prove me wrong has been the most disorienting experience of my life." "Disorienting how?" "Because if I was wrong about you, what else was I wrong about?" Vivienne's voice dropped. "What else did I convince myself was impossible because it was easier than hoping?" Julian felt his throat tighten. "Vivienne, what are you saying?" "I am saying that you told me to ask you again in 6 months. But I think I already know the answer. I think I have known for a while. I was just scared to admit it." The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the backyard, Mira laughed at something, the sound carrying through the warm evening air. And on the porch, 2 people who had once destroyed each other sat on the edge of something new. "What do you know?" Julian asked quietly. "That you have changed. That this version of you is real. That you are not the same man who chose a business dinner over my hospital bed." She reached over and took his hand. "And that maybe, possibly, I'm ready to stop being scared." Julian felt tears threatening. He did not fight them. "I love you," he said. "I never stopped loving you. Even when I was making every wrong choice, even when I was destroying what we had, I loved you. I was just too broken to show it properly. I know." Vivienne's eyes were glistening too. I think I always knew. That is why it hurts so much. I am sorry. Julian brought her hand to his lips. I am so sorry for everything I put you through, for the years you spent alone, for the moments I should have been there and was not. I cannot change the past, but I swear to you, Vivienne, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel abandoned again. Vivienne leaned toward him, and for the first time in 6 years, their lips met. The kiss was soft, tentative, tasting of lemonade and forgiveness. It was not the passionate kisses of their youth, fueled by attraction and urgency. It was something deeper, something earned, a promise sealed in the language that existed before words. When they pulled apart, Mira was standing at the edge of the porch, watching them with undisguised satisfaction. Finally, she declared, I have been waiting forever for you two to stop being silly. Julian laughed, the sound mixing with Vivienne's surprised giggle. How long is forever? At least since last month. Mira climbed onto the porch and wedged herself between them. That is very long when you are 6, almost 7, Vivienne corrected, wrapping an arm around her daughter. Almost 7. Mira agreed, which is practically grown up. They sat together as the last light faded from the sky, a family that had almost never existed, finding its way towards something none of them had dared to imagine. The months that followed were not a fairy tale. Vivienne was clear about that from the beginning. This does not mean we are fixed. She told Julian the morning after their first kiss. This means we are starting. Carefully, slowly, with full awareness of everything that went wrong before. I understand. I mean it, Julian. I have spent 6 years learning to live without you, learning that I did not need a partner to be complete. I am not going to give that up just because we kissed on my porch. I would never ask you to. Good. Because if we do this, if we really try to build something, it has to be as equals. Not the old dynamic where I needed you and you knew it. I do not need you anymore. I want you, and that is different. It is better. Julian agreed. It is so much better. They dated. Actually dated, like two adults getting to know each other rather than former lovers falling back into old patterns. Julian took Vivienne to dinner at quiet restaurants where they talked for hours. They went to museums and movies and walked through Boston's historic neighborhoods, holding hands like teenagers. They also fought. Real arguments about real things. Julian's occasional tendency to slip into problem-solving mode when Vivienne just wanted to be heard. Vivienne's habit of withdrawing instead of expressing anger. The unspoken resentments that had never been properly addressed and occasionally surfaced in unexpected moments. But they fought differently than before, with a commitment to resolution rather than victory, with the understanding that walking away was not an option, not because they could not survive alone, but because they had chosen not to. Mira observed all of this with the bemused patience of a child who had known this was coming all along. Are you boyfriend and girlfriend now? She asked Julian during one of their Saturday pancake breakfasts. Something like that. Julian glanced at Vivienne, who smiled. We are two people who care about each other and are figuring out what that means. That sounds complicated. It is, but the good kind of complicated. Mira considered this while drowning her pancakes in syrup. Sophie at school says her parents used to not like each other, but now they are married and they like each other a lot. She thinks people can change if they try really hard. Sophie sounds very wise. She is. Mira took a bite of her pancake. I think you try really hard. I do. I know. That is why I like you now. Coming from his daughter, it was the highest praise Julian had ever received. 1 year after the Valentine's gala, Julian made a decision that would reshape everything once again. He was sitting in his New York office, looking at the quarterly reports that showed Axiom's continued growth despite his reduced involvement, when he realized something fundamental. He did not want to be here anymore, not just in this office, in this city, in this life he had built before Mira, before Vivienne, before everything that actually mattered. He picked up the phone and called Dominic. I need you to do something for me. Of course, sir. I need you to find commercial real estate in Boston, something suitable for a satellite headquarters. And I need you to find me a house, something in a family neighborhood, close to good schools. Dominic was silent for a moment. Are you relocating, sir? I am relocating everything. Axiom's headquarters will remain in New York, but I am establishing a permanent presence in Boston. I want to be there 3 weeks out of every month, minimum. That is a significant change. Yes, it is. Another pause. May I ask why? Because my family is there, Julian said simply, and I am tired of leaving them. He told Vivienne that evening during their regular video call. She listened in silence as he outlined his plan, her expression shifting through surprise, disbelief, and something that looked almost like fear. You are moving to Boston. I am moving to Boston. Julian, that is a massive decision. You cannot just uproot your entire life because we have been dating for a few months. It is not just a few months, Julian countered gently. It is a year of proving myself to our daughter. A year of rebuilding trust with you. A year of flying back and forth so often that the flight attendants know my coffee order. I am not making this decision impulsively. I am making it because it is right. But your company, your life in New York, my company can function without my daily presence. I have spent the last year proving that. And my life in New York. He paused, searching for the right words. There is nothing in New York that matters as much as what I have in Boston. Nothing. Vivienne was quiet for a long moment. Through the screen, Julian could see her processing, weighing, trying to find the objection that would slow this down. What about us? She finally asked. Does this mean you expect us to live together? To become an instant family? Because I am not sure we are ready for that. No. Julian shook his head. I am not buying a house for us. I am buying a house for me so that I can be close to Mira, so that I can pick her up from school and attend her events and be part of her daily life instead of just visiting. What happens between you and me, that is separate. We keep building at whatever pace feels right. You would really do that. Move across the country just to be near her. I would move across the world. Julian's voice was steady. She is my daughter. I missed 6 years. I am not missing anymore. Something shifted in Vivienne's expression. The last remnant of doubt, perhaps, finally releasing its hold. Okay, she said. Okay, find your house. Move to Boston. Be near our daughter. She paused, and a smile played at the corners of her lips. And maybe, once you are settled, we can talk about what comes next for us. I would like that. Me too, she admitted. More than I expected to. Julian found a house in a family neighborhood 10 minutes from Vivienne's place. A craftsman-style home with 4 bedrooms, a big backyard, and a kitchen designed for family meals. He closed on it 6 weeks later and invited Mira for the tour before he moved in. This will be your room when you stay over. Julian opened a door to reveal a bedroom with built-in bookshelves, large windows, and walls painted her favorite shade of purple. I thought you could use it for your drawings. We can decorate it however you want. Mira stepped inside slowly, her eyes wide, taking in every detail. This is mine. Really yours. She turned to look at him, and her eyes were bright with tears she was trying not to shed. You bought a house so I could have a room. I bought a house so I could be close to you. Julian crouched down to her level. The room is just a bonus. Mira launched herself into his arms, hugging him so tightly he could barely breathe. I love you, Dad, she whispered into his shoulder. Julian felt his own tears fall. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in the world. Vivienne stood in the doorway, watching this moment with an expression that made Julian's heart ache with hope. When their eyes met over Mira's shoulder, she smiled. A real smile, the kind he remembered from before everything went wrong. Welcome to Boston, she said quietly. It is good to be home, Julian replied, and meant it. The first year in Boston was an adjustment. Julian learned the rhythms of suburban life, so different from the Manhattan existence he had known. He attended parent-teacher conferences and coached Mira's youth soccer team despite knowing nothing about soccer. He hosted birthday parties in his backyard and learned which grocery store had the best produce. He became a regular at the coffee shop near Mira's school, where he worked on his laptop while waiting for pickup. I need to pause here because we have reached a critical moment. Not just in this story, but in the universal human experience of learning to trust again. Vivienne spent 6 years building walls strong enough to protect her from ever being hurt the way Julian hurt her. And those walls worked. They kept her safe. But here is the thing about walls. They do not just keep pain out. They keep everything out. Love, connection, the possibility of something better than just surviving. If you have ever built walls like that, if you have ever had to decide whether safety was worth the cost of possibility, then you understand what Vivienne faced. This is the hardest choice. Not whether to forgive someone else, but whether to forgive yourself for wanting to trust them again. Hit that like button if this resonates with you. Leave a comment telling me about a time you had to choose between safety and possibility. And stay with me because what happens next will change everything. The relationship between Julian and Vivienne deepened as the months passed. They stopped treating their connection as fragile and started treating it as foundation. They had difficult conversations about the past, the ones they had been avoiding, and emerged closer instead of further apart. Vivienne told Julian about the loneliest nights, the ones where she had wondered if she was strong enough to do this alone. Julian told Vivienne about the emptiness he had felt even at the height of his success, the sense that he was building castles on sand. They learned each other's new selves, not just remembering who they had been, but discovering who they had become. Vivienne was fiercer now, more independent, less willing to compromise herself for anyone. Julian was softer, more present, more comfortable with vulnerability than he had ever been before. They fell in love again. Not the same love, but something built on the ruins of the first version, stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. 2 years after the Valentine's gala, on a quiet Sunday evening, they were having dinner at Julian's house. Mira had helped set the table and was now explaining her latest school project, a presentation about marine biology that had required extensive research and several trips to the aquarium. "And did you know that octopuses have 3 hearts?" she was saying, gesturing with her fork for emphasis. 3. And they have blue blood. Blue, like aliens. "That is incredible," Julian said, genuinely fascinated. "I know." Mira beamed. "I'm going to get an A. I can feel it." Vivienne laughed. "Confidence is good. But maybe finish your vegetables before you start planning your acceptance speech." "Fine." Mira stabbed a broccoli floret with theatrical reluctance. "But I am still going to get an A." After dinner, while Vivienne washed dishes and Julian dried them, Mira reappeared in the kitchen with an expression of unusual seriousness. "I have a question," she announced. "What is it, sweetheart? Are you two ever going to get married?" The dish Julian was drying slipped from his hands and clattered into the sink. Vivienne went very still, suds dripping from her fingers. "That is a big question," Vivienne managed. "I know." Mira climbed onto a kitchen stool and folded her hands on the counter, looking like a tiny executive preparing to conduct a meeting. "But I have been thinking about it. Sophie's parents got married after they already had her, and now they all live in the same house. It is more efficient." Julian exchanged a look with Vivienne. "More efficient?" "Yes, you live here. We live there. You come over and we come over, and there is always driving and planning. If we all lived together, there would be less logistics." "Where did you learn the word logistics?" "From you," Mira said pointedly. "You say it a lot when you're talking about work stuff." "I do say it a lot," Julian admitted. "So," Mira pressed, "are you going to get married or not? Because I think you should. You love each other, I can tell. And I want us to be a real family that lives in one house like normal people." The silence that followed was charged with everything said and unsaid over the past 2 years. Julian looked at Vivienne, his heart pounding. "What do you think?" he asked quietly. "I think our daughter is terrifyingly logical." Vivienne wiped her hands on a towel, her eyes meeting his. "I also think she has a point." "She does." "Julian." Vivienne stepped closer to him. "Are you asking me something?" "I have been wanting to ask you something for months," he admitted. "I just did not know if you were ready. If we were ready. And now. Now I am being instructed by a 7-year-old to stop being silly." "Almost 8. Mira correct. "Almost 8. Julian smiled. "Who apparently has our whole life planned out." Vivienne laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. "I think she gets that from both of us." Julian reached into his pocket. He had been carrying the ring for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment, not knowing it would arrive during dish duty with an impatient child as his CO conspirator. "Vivienne Holloway," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I spent too many years making the wrong choices. I let you go when I should have held on. I chose empty success over everything that mattered. And then by some miracle, I got a second chance. This past 2 years, watching you, loving you, learning what it means to be present for the people I love, they have been the best years of my life." "Julian," Vivienne whispered, "I know I cannot change the past. I cannot give you back the years you spent alone, or the moments I should have been there for. But I can promise you this. I will spend every day of our future proving that I am worth the chance you gave me. I will show up. I will stay. I will choose you, choose us, choose our family every single day." He opened the ring box. The diamond caught the kitchen light, sparkling against the velvet. "Will you marry me?" Vivienne looked at the ring, then at Julian, then at their daughter, who was watching with barely contained excitement. "Yes," Vivienne said. "Yes, I will marry you." Mira shrieked with joy, launching herself at both of them and turning the moment into a group hug that nearly knocked them all over. They stood there in the kitchen, laughing and crying and holding each other, a family that had almost never existed finally becoming whole. Finally, Mira declared, "Now we can live in one house and there will be way less driving." "Is that why you pushed for this?" Vivienne asked, laughing through her tears. "To reduce your commute time. That is one reason." Mira grinned. "Also, I just really wanted a dad who lives with us. Is that okay?" Julian felt his heart overflow. "That is more than okay. That is everything I have ever wanted." They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony overlooking Boston Harbor. Mira served as flower girl, ring bearer, and unofficial wedding coordinator. She had strong opinions about everything from the cake flavor to the guest list to the exact shade of purple the bridesmaids should wear. Camille, who had finally admitted that Julian might have actually changed after watching him for 2.5 years, stood beside Vivienne as her maid of honor. Julian's father attended. Their relationship was still complicated, still marked by years of emotional distance. But Gregory had watched his son transform over the past 2 years, and something in him had begun to soften. He did not approve of everything Julian had done, but he could not deny the results. "She seems happy," Gregory observed during the reception, watching Mira dance with Julian on the makeshift dance floor. "They both do." "They are," Julian agreed. "You gave up a lot for this. The expansion, the deals, the empire we were building together. I gave up the things that did not matter for the things that do." Gregory was silent for a moment. Then he said something Julian had never heard from him before. "I am proud of you." Julian looked at his father, searching for the catch, the qualification, the lesson wrapped in approval. There was none. "Thank you," Julian said. "That means more than you know. Your mother would have loved this," Gregory continued quietly. "She always said I was too hard on you, that I was teaching you to succeed at the cost of everything else. She was right. I did not see it then, but I see it now." Julian felt old wounds begin to heal, wounds he had not even realized were still open. "It is not too late," he said. "To do things differently." Gregory nodded slowly. "Perhaps not. Perhaps not." The wedding ended with Julian and Vivienne swaying on the dance floor, their daughter wedged between them, all three moving together to a song about new beginnings. "We did it," Vivienne murmured against Julian's shoulder. "We did it." He agreed. Not just the wedding, all of it, the rebuilding, the trusting, the becoming something better than we were. No regrets, only gratitude. Julian pulled back to look at her face. Gratitude for second chances, for daughters who refuse to let adults be silly, for the chance to prove that people can change if they really want to. Vivienne smiled, and it was the smile he had fallen in love with a decade ago. The smile he had thought he would never see again after everything he had destroyed. "Welcome to the rest of our lives," she said. "I have been waiting for this," Julian replied. "My whole life, I have been waiting for this." They moved into Julian's house together the week after the wedding. Mira took possession of her purple bedroom with the satisfaction of someone who had been planning this outcome for months. "I told you this would happen," she informed Julian as he helped her hang pictures on her walls. "I knew it the first day I met you." "You did not." "I did too." Mira handed him a frame containing a photo of the three of them at the butterfly pavilion, taken during their second visit together. "When you looked at Mama, I could tell. You had sorry eyes, but also love eyes. I knew you would figure it out eventually. You are very wise for your age." "I know," Mira shrugged. "Mama says I get it from her, but I think maybe I get it from both of you." Julian smiled and hung the photo in the center of her wall, where she could see it from her bed. "There," he said. "Perfect." Mira studied it critically. "Yes," she agreed. "It is perfect." They fell into the rhythm of family life. Mornings rushed with breakfast and backpack checks and the eternal search for missing shoes. Evenings filled with homework supervision and dinner preparation and bedtime stories that somehow always ran longer than planned. Weekends crowded with activities and errands and the precious unstructured hours where they simply existed together. Julian learned that family life was not efficient. It was not optimized. It was messy and unpredictable and sometimes frustrating. It was also the most meaningful thing he had ever done. He learned that being present mattered more than being productive, that listening was more important than solving, that showing up, consistently and without agenda, was the foundation everything else built upon. He learned that love was not a feeling, but a practice, something you did every day, in small ways that accumulated into something unshakable. And on the nights when old patterns tried to resurface, when work demanded more than he should give, when the temptation to fall back into the comfortable numbness of achievement whispered in his ear, he remembered. He remembered the champagne glass shattering on marble, the shock on Vivienne's face, the gray-blue eyes of a daughter he had not known existed. He remembered the year of proving himself, the hard conversations, the moments of doubt, the slow, painful work of becoming someone worth trusting. He remembered that second chances were not given. They were earned, every single day. 5 years after the Valentine's gala that changed everything, Julian sat on the back porch of their Boston home, watching his family. Mira was 11 now, tall and confident, more like her mother every day. She was teaching her 3-year-old brother Leo how to catch fireflies in the gathering dusk. Leo was terrible at it, but Mira was patient, guiding his small hands, celebrating every near miss as if it were a victory. Vivienne sat beside Julian, her hand in his, a cup of tea cooling beside her. Her fashion empire had continued to grow, and the foundation for single parents she had started was now in 12 cities. She had done it all while raising 2 children and building a marriage, proving what Julian had always known. She was extraordinary. "What are you thinking about?" she asked quietly. Julian watched Leo finally catch a firefly, his shriek of triumph echoing across the yard. "I'm thinking about how close I came to missing all of this," he said. "If you had not been at that gala, if I had not seen Mira, I would have spent my whole life not knowing what I was missing. But I was there, and you did see her." "Yes." Julian squeezed her hand. "And then you gave me a chance I did not deserve, and I spent every day since then trying to be worthy of it." "You are worthy of it." Vivienne leaned her head against his shoulder. "You have been worthy of it for a long time. I still wake up sometimes afraid it was all a dream, that I am back in my penthouse, alone, building an empire that means nothing." "It is not a dream," Vivienne assured him. "This is real. We are real. Dad," Mira's voice carried across the yard, "Leo wants to show you his firefly, but you have to come now because he will probably let it go in about 3 seconds. Julian laughed and stood, pulling Vivienne up with him. "Coming," he called back. They walked together toward their children, toward the fireflies blinking in the summer darkness, toward the life they had built from the ashes of everything they had lost. And that is where this story ends. But not really, because real stories do not have endings. They have continuations. Julian and Vivienne will face more challenges. Mira will grow up and face her own. Leo will find his place in the world. The work of love and trust never actually finishes. But here is what I want you to take from this story. Second chances are real, but they must be earned. Transformation is possible, but it requires work. And sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for something better than you ever imagined. Julian Mercer walked into a Valentine's party not knowing he had a daughter. He walked out of it a changed man, not because of some magical revelation, but because he was finally willing to do the hard work of becoming someone different. He showed up. He stayed. He chose love over achievement, presence over success, family over empire. Every single day, he made that choice. And over time, those daily choices became something unbreakable. If you are watching this story and wondering whether it is too late for you, whether the mistakes you have made are too big to fix, whether the people you have hurt can ever trust you again, I want you to know something. It is not too late. It is never too late. But you have to be willing to do the work, not the grand gestures, the daily showing up, the consistent proving, the small acts of love that accumulate into something that cannot be denied. That is what Julian learned. That is what I hope you take from his story. If this story moved you, if it made you believe that broken things can be rebuilt, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Maybe someone who has given up on second chances, or someone who needs courage to try again. Subscribe to Mr. Dawson's Stories and turn on notifications because we tell stories like this every week. Stories about real people, messy love, hard-won redemption, and the belief that everyone deserves the chance to become better than they were. Drop a comment telling me what you thought. Did Julian deserve forgiveness? Would you have trusted him again? What does this story mean to you? And remember this, your story is not over. The next chapter is yours to write. The second chances you give yourself are just as important as the ones you give to others. And the person you become tomorrow does not have to be limited by who you were yesterday. Julian Mercer learned that lesson in a ballroom on Valentine's night, watching a champagne glass shatter at his feet and his whole world rearrange itself around a truth he had never expected. Maybe your moment of rearrangement is still coming. Maybe it already happened, and you are in the middle of the rebuilding. Either way, I hope you find the courage to show up, to stay, to do the work, and to trust that the life you are building is worth every difficult step. Until next time, this is Mr. Dawson Stories. Thank you for being here. Thank you for walking this journey with me. And thank you for believing, even when it is hard, that love can survive anything if both people are willing to fight for it. The story ends where all the best stories end. Not with fireworks or perfect moments, but with ordinary people living ordinary lives, grateful for every second they almost did not have. Julian Mercer arrived at a Valentine's party, unaware he had a daughter. He left it as a father, and in the years that followed he learned something that all the business success in the world could not teach him. The greatest achievement is not building an empire. It is building a family, not creating wealth, but creating trust, not being successful, but being present. And sometimes, if you are very lucky and very willing to change, you get the chance to do it right. Julian got that chance, and he made it count. Every single day.